again, students. This is your flipped grammar lesson for Storytown Lesson 22. For this lesson, you will need your Whisk worksheet and a pen or a pencil. On your Whisk worksheet, next to Unit of Study, please write Principal Parts of Verbs. You can see the spelling of that right here on the screen. Then in the W section, please write down where and when you watched this video. After that, you'll be ready to get started. So let's go. First, what do we mean when we talk about the principal parts of a verb? If something is a principal part of something, it means it's the most important aspect of that thing. So when we're talking about what are the principal parts of a verb, we mean that every verb has 4 main forms, and these forms are listed on this slide. First is the infinitive form, which is the form that goes with to, such as to buy, to listen, to speak. Next is the past tense, which usually ends with ed, though we have gone over some of those irregular past tense forms in previous lessons. The 2 we're going to learn about today are the present participle and past participle. So let's keep those in mind as we keep on learning about the principal parts of a verb. We use these 4 principal parts of verbs to make up all of the different tenses that verbs can take in English. Already this year, we have studied the simple past, present, and future. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we will be looking at the other verb tenses that are listed on this screen. I've made this chart to help you see what the principal parts of verbs are. So you can see that the infinitive form goes with to. The past tense, we've already learned this year, usually ends in ed, but not always. And as we are about to find out, the present participle ends with the ing form of the verb. The past participle usually ends with ed, but we will go over some of those irregular cases as well. Here is the first term you need to remember this week: present participle. As I mentioned on the previous screen, the present participle is formed by adding ing to the verb. You can use the present participle, or ing form of the verb, with the helping verbs am, is, are, was, and were, in order to make the past, present, and future progressive verb tenses. Here are some sentences that use present participles to make a progressive verb tense. Maria is singing while she cooks. Singing is the present participle, and is singing is the present progressive verb tense. We all are pitching in to help. Pitching is the present participle, and are pitching is the present progressive verb in this sentence. The present participle of a verb can also be used in other ways. Remember, you form the present participle by adding ing to the verb. Present participles can also be used to create adjectives and describe actions. So in these sentences, find the present participle. We were captivated by the interesting story. Interesting took the verb interest and added ing in order to describe the story, or act as an adjective. Dropping the weapon, she put her hands in the air. Dropping describes the action the person is taking at the same time she is putting her hands in the air. In both of these sentences, the ing forms the present participle form of the verb. In Storytown this week, we're going to be reading about the Emperor Qin Shi Huang, who was a kind of eccentric person, and you'll find out why while we're reading. But I decided to highlight a few other eccentric people while we are working on our grammar concepts this week. The first one is Stephen King, and Stephen King is a person who really hates adverbs. Now, let's look at these sentences about Stephen King and find the present participle in each sentence. Stephen King's captivating tales are popular among many adult readers. What is the present participle? Did you find the word captivating? In this case, the present participle is acting as an adjective, describing his tales. The second sentence. King was encouraging writers to use better verbs. What's the present participle? Did you find the word encouraging? Encouraging takes the verb encourage and adds an ing. Use it with the helping verb was, and you have the past progressive form of the verb encourage. Was encouraging uses the present participle to make the verb form. Okay, now let's look at the past participle. This one can be a little bit tricky. To form the past participle of a verb, most of the time you add ed to the main verb. However, remember with past tense, sometimes there are tricky and irregular forms of the verb, so they're not always easy to find. How do we use a past participle? Well, you can use it with the helping verb has, have, or had in order to make the past, present, and future perfect tenses. We'll be dealing with these tenses a little bit more later in the year, but just think, has, have, and had are kind of red flag words to tell us we might be dealing with a past participle. Let's look at the sentences. John has invited us over to see his baseball card collection. I see invited ends with the ed, so I know that's my past participle. I have used the helping verb has to make the present perfect tense in this sentence, but invited is the past participle that I used in my verb phrase. Next, she had given the toys to a charity. Given isn't using that regular ed ending to make the past tense. Instead, we have an irregular verb here, so it's a little trickier to find. However, using the helping verb had shows us that we do have the perfect tense. Had given is the past perfect form of the verb. How else can we use a past participle? Remember, a past participle adds ed to the main verb most of the time. Well, just like a present participle, a past participle can be used as an adjective, and it can also be used to describe situations. So let's look at the sentences. The tired mother left the dirty dishes in the sink. Tired is a form of the verb tire, but in this case it's describing the mother, so it's acting like an adjective. Next, finally finished, he gave the project to his teacher. Finished is describing the situation by using the ed form of the verb, which is the past participle. Let's look at our next eccentric person while finding the past participle in sentences. Imelda Marcos was the First Lady of the Philippines for a few years, and she is most famous for her enormous shoe collection. Just look at this. Now let's look at the sentences. Imelda Marcos had collected over 1,000 pairs of shoes. What's the past participle? Did you find the word collected? In this case, it ends with an ed, so it's a little easier to find. Pair it with the helping verb had, and you have the verb phrase had collected, which is the past perfect tense. Collected is the past participle. Next sentence. The impoverished people of the Philippines were very upset by her spending habits. What's the past participle? Did you find the word impoverished? Impoverished is the ed or past participle form of the verb impoverish. Well, in this case though, it's describing the people, so it's acting like an adjective. As a bonus, did you find that I also had the word spending in here, which is a present participle that's describing the habits? So here's what we've done so far at a glance. Remember, the present participle ends with ing. It's used to make the progressive tenses, and they can be used as adjectives. Then, the past participle ends with ed most of the time. It's used to make the perfect tenses, and just like the present participle, it can be used as an adjective. Now I want you to find either the present or the past participle in the sentences. This is a picture of a man named Howard Hughes, who was a really famous movie star and director, and he was a germaphobe. He actually sealed himself off from people and virtually starved himself to death because he was so afraid of contracting diseases. Here's our sentence. Frightened of germs, Howard Hughes required his staff to wash their hands repeatedly. Did you find the past participle frightened? Frightened of germs is a phrase that's telling us what the situation is. So, frightened is the past participle in the sentence. Our last example is about a woman named Sarah Winchester, who believed that spirits would kill her if she ever stopped constructing her home. So she ended up with this enormous mansion that was constantly under construction for over 30 years. You can go visit it in California. Here's our sentence. Does it have a present or past participle? Sarah Winchester believed spirits were haunting her. I tried to trick you with this one. Did you find the present participle haunting? I hope so. It's paired up with the helping verb were, which shows us that it's a participle form because were haunting works together to make the past progressive verb tense. Some of you may have thought that believed would be a participle in this sentence, but believed does not work in this sentence along with the helping verb, and it's simply in the simple past tense. It's not making a perfect tense, so it's not a past participle. That's it. In this video, you learned about the principal parts of verbs, including two new parts of verbs, which are the present and past participles. So, in the S section, please write a 5-sentence summary of what you learned from the video. Then in the Q section, write a question you might have about something you did not understand in the video. If you have no questions, then create a test question for your classmates. As always, make sure your assignment is completed on time and turned in by the due date. We'll see you next week.